Hi everyone, welcome to week 7. We've got a pretty short PowerPoint this week, so let's just get started. The readings this week in resilience thinking really start to paint the big picture of what resilience is and how you might think as a manager of applying it. A couple of key points that they point out: seeing the field, the forest, the farm, the family, the business, the organization, or your agency as a complex adaptive system that is constantly changing and adapting to a changing world. Within that context, identifying the economic, social, and environmental forces that are driving a system towards a threshold. The readings this week really emphasize um, that sort of identification of the thresholds and identifying those variables that drive the system towards thresholds. And then really putting it all together, thinking about the big picture, considering systems, linkages, thresholds, and cycles, really in everything that's important to us. So thinking back to the social ecological system framing, that we are embedded in these systems where we live, where we work, where we play. The reading also makes a distinction between specified resilience and general resilience. Specified resilience refers to when we're in a situation where we know we want to keep some component of the system or some specific system resilient to some specific shock. So it's targeting the level of key variables within a specified range to avoid the threshold. So knowing the specified range and keeping it within that range. So the example they give is the resilience of Everglades vegetation uh, to fires and droughts as phosphate levels increase. They contrast that with general resilience. Uh, you know, Normally when we would speak of resilience, or at least myself, I probably think about general resilience, maintaining general capacities of a system to allow it to absorb disturbance. So we just generally think of systems that we want to be resilient, and think about multiple disturbances that we want them to be resilient to. They discuss 3 key factors: diversity, how diverse are the components; modularity, how tightly connected, mm, how many different subcomponents are they, and what are the feedbacks between those subcomponents; and then tightness of feedbacks. I thought the case study this week, based in Sweden, did a really good job of discussing adaptive governance, even if they weren't incredibly explicit about it being adaptive governance. Just to reemphasize, I know I've mentioned this before, but adaptive governance is a particular form of governance that emphasizes the capacity to adapt to changing relationships between society and ecosystems in ways that sustain ecosystem services. A really key component is thinking about networks, thinking about connections between multiple levels of governance. Uh, an adaptive governance system steers or guides how society functions and makes decisions. And then the example in the case study was the EKV, that they were referring to. Here's a really good diagram of the EKV. You're thinking about the multiple levels and different actors involved in making decisions and steering the system. I also mentioned or referenced a practitioner's book for resilience assessment. I've uploaded that handbook as a supplementary sort of reading or guide for those of you who do work full time and sort of are trying to consider how you might practice this. That guide is really useful, could be really interesting. There are 5 main stages of the assessment framework, beginning with describing the system, then understanding system dynamics, probing system interactions, and evaluating governance, and finally acting on the assessment. The actual process is iterative and reflexive at each stage and requires referring back to earlier steps and revising as necessary. Like I said, short PowerPoint for this week. Be sure you do the readings for the week. Undergraduates, make sure you contribute to the wiki. Please reach out if you have any questions on the paper or the project guidelines. To the degree that you can think about that a little bit this week, prior to the exam next week, and then prior to spring break, I think that will benefit you. Exam 2 is next week, and I'll provide a study guide later this week. As always, please let me know if you have any questions, thoughts, concerns, etc. Great, thanks, and have a wonderful week.